Mexican painter Diego Rivera, who at the height of his career was internationally famous, very well known. He was also well known as a fervent Marxist, and many of his murals depicted the plight of the working man. He also helped found the Union of Technical Workers, Painters, and Sculptors, and sheltered Leon Trotsky and his wife in his home. Diego Rivera.
He was married, wasn't he?
Yes. He had a wife. Yes, I believe she dabbled in some paint. Yeah.
So.
Yes, she certainly did. Diego Rivera. He actually did paint Paulette Goddard, who was Charlie Chaplin's wife. She refused to pose naked for him, however. So he hired a model to stand behind her naked and painted her that way. He obviously did not have that problem here. If you look in here when you pass by, you'll see two paintings of Picasso's. Picasso, of course, the Spanish-born painter who spent most of his life in France. He was a prolific painter, 91 years old, I believe, when he died, and he was a sculptor, a painter, a poet, a set designer, a playwright. He was very prolific. This first painting here is Man is Machine. It is the seated bather. He wanted to deconstruct the human being into a series of mechanical parts. You can tell that it is a female by her large protuberances in front. Next to it, of course, is the femme fleur, who also is a female. You can detect that by her large. I see we sense a theme here. This, of course, is by Lucian Freud, the famous neo-figurative portrait painter, who was the grandson of Sigmund Freud, the famous psychologist, and his father was the architect Ernst Freud, the famous architect. He was quite the rabble-rouser in his youth, was Lucian Freud. He actually managed to burn his school. He set fire to it. He was expelled a lot, as you can imagine.
Makes sense.
He was quite the bohemian in his youth. He hung out with socialites and gambled and drank and generally had a fine time in his youth.
What's the name of this picture, and who is she?
Oh, she's his first wife. Yeah, she was the illegitimate daughter of Jacob Epstein, the sculptor. Yeah.
Don't want to know about her.
Yeah, I believe she also dabbled in some paint.
Oh,
As they do.
Yeah.
They admire
Was she born with no
the man who
face?
does the painting. Of course, and then they need to pick up some paint themselves and paint little flowers and things. Freud was very enamored of painting the erotic sensuality of his subjects, of his models, and including all bodily imperfections and this sort of thing. He reveled in that. Yes, very intimate portraits. He was very famous
Is
for
it
that.
really a picture of her, or is it really about the dog?
Well, no, the dog holds a great importance, as you can see. I mean, it's the faithful. They're both faithful companions.
Why is this one blue? That's disappointing.
Yes, that's very modest. It's modesty, really, is what it is. It's an honor to be able to pose for a great artist such as these great masters, and to be unclothed and naked before them is, I think, a great honor.
Yeah, she missed out.
He elected not to, as Paulette Goddard did as well, but you do what you can do. Émile Bernard, of course, was also a French painter. He studied at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, but he was actually suspended for having expressionist tendencies. The famous allusion here is the three graces, which is, of course, a very famous subject in art. His three graces, of course, was a pretty good joke, I think. Collection of different pigmented females. Very good joke.
You got the only three there are, so that's great.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a few others in there, but you don't want to overcrowd a painting. Sure. You don't want to keep it, balance. Composition. Andrew Wyeth, of course, the American realist, the father of the famous realist Jamie Wyeth, and he was the son, the fifth and last son, of the famous poster and magazine illustrator N.C. Wyeth. And here we have his famous painting of Siri. He's got many paintings of her over the 10 years that he did paint her. Here, I think he has captured brilliantly her childlike, naked innocence. Being the youthful beauty that she was.
Do you know how old she was?
Oh, she was old enough.
I think not.
Well, she was, I think 17. That's fine.
No.
That's fine. She was old enough. Yeah.
No, she wasn't.
Maybe perhaps younger. But in any case, she had, of course, her parents' permission. They were, like her parents, were honored to have, to be painted by an illustrious painter like Andrew Wyeth, of course. Older, let us say, yes. Older, yes. But very respected, and of course his art speaks for itself, the genius involved there. And she, of course, has been honored even as a child to be naked and exposing herself to such a brilliant painter. I'm sure.
And this would have been in someone's drawing room for the entertainment of guests, right? Guests of stature.
Certainly an artistic appreciation.
Right, yes.
It's not any prurient way.
No.
No, of course not. No, of course not.
I mean, ladies probably liked it too.
I'm sure.
Probably.
Yeah, well,
If we'd ask.
People like different things. But we won't go into those for sure. This, of course, is one of Paul Gauguin's work, who is a brilliant colorist, Paul Gauguin. He was also a very successful stockbroker in Paris before the market crash. And then the poor man was forced to depend upon the money of his wife to support him and his five children, which is very hard for any man to endure.
So how did he get any work done living with them?
Well, actually, he decided that he would leave them.
Oh!
Which is what he did to pursue his artistic career.
Yeah.
Because art was a calling, yes? Art is a calling.
So he probably went to like an atelier somewhere and hunkered down.
Well, not yet. First he went off and, and visited his friend Van Gogh in Arles, in south of France, to discuss art and so forth. But, of course, they argued because they were very
virile men.
Yes,
Yeah,
and the art was so intense,
strong.
and their arguments grew hot and heavy. And eventually, he left, and he decided, no, this is it. This is it. I've had enough of all of this. I'm going to move off to Tahiti because they're like this simple and cheap, and there's no civilization. I can leave the constrictures of civilization and all the rules and the marriage and the kids and leave all that behind.
God, you really have to admire his courage.
I think it is, yes, indeed, and to strike out there, in a place where, well, he would have been a bit exalted given his position, his status in society, but still, you're off. When he got to Tahiti, he found that Tahiti wasn't quite as primitive and idyllic as he thought it was, so he decided that he would recreate that idyllic life in his paintings of young women and young girls. Lots of young women.
She does look really
Lots
good.
of young girls.
And never dressed.
Well, no, it's, it's a primitive society, so for my paintings, you will need to, contribute to the look of the primitive nature of it all, and remove your inhibitions and your clothing. One of those young women he actually did marry. She was she was a little young, but 13, but still, it was actually given her. But anyway, so it wasn't his responsibility, yes, it was given her. So what are you going to do? You know,
Say
no.
Yeah,
Right, that's
okay.
great.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he married her, but he was okay, really, because he knew that the rules in Tahiti of divorce at the time were simply you take her belongings and put them outside your house and you are divorced. So he didn't have to worry too much about being, completely tied down by the rigors of civilization which he had left.
Civilization,
Yeah.
syphilis.
So,
I think
actually,
syphilis was a big problem as well, wasn't it? I mean, 13,
Well,
13 maybe he was a little safer.
he actually died of cardiovascular syphilis, but that's another
Oh,
point.
so he gave it to the young girl.
It's conceivable, I suppose, or maybe the other way around. We don't know.
Not at all.
We don't know. Yves Klein, of course, was one of the important painters of the last century. He was actually heavily into the martial arts before he became a painter, before he devoted himself to painting. And he was famous for saying, "Art is where the artist goes."
Oh.
You think about that. Art is wherever the artist goes. So wherever you go as an artist, art follows you because you create art in whatever you do. And he liked to play with the power of elemental natural materials in his art. So what he did was he got models and had them take their clothing off.
Female models.
Well, female models, yes, of course.
Not
Yeah.
males.
Oh, no, we wouldn't want to see male. No. So anyway, the female models were, then he covered them with lapis lazuli paint. And then he had them drag each other across the canvas, and art is wherever the artist goes. So she produced art on the canvas by having these women. He would also
skin
have
mark.
There you go.
Yes, anyway, you can see the impression here of the naked woman as she was dragged across the canvas. And of course, he did have special music composed for it, and he had an orchestra playing there, and about 100 people in attendance while this took place.
So,
But this was not sexualized entertainment. This was pure art, right?
so he had one woman was painted and another woman pulled.
Well, she was naked too, of
Yes.
course.
So where's his
No, we got-
placement in the making of that art?
Oh, well, he would be standing in the corner conducting like this, like he was conducting them, and he was conducting the orchestra as well, because the music, very intense music that he would set in motion.
Well, and it seems to me that if he wasn't conducting, they would have been the artists. Which is, that would have been weird, right?
It is a good point. However, you have to consider this. They were, in effect, human paintbrushes. You see, they were his paintbrushes.
Like mentally.
Yes. Well, yeah, he would use them as paintbrushes. He would set them in motion, and they would drag as if he were commanding them to move across the canvas. Yeah.
More like Warhol's art is what you can get away with, right?
And he got away with it.
There he is.
Oh, right over here we have William de Kooning's work here. William de Kooning was, of course, an abstract expressionist mostly. Well, exclusively, really, except he did paint several of these paintings of a series he called The Woman. Originally, he became fascinated by these cigarette ads in newspapers that had these beautiful, alluring red lips. And he would cut them out, and he would put them on the canvas. And then later, he decided, no, this is not good enough. He would take them off, and then he painted this figurative series. There's 6 of them, I believe, in all. But the only figurative paintings he did.
Did you make up the thing about the lips?
No, I did
No,
not.
that's
Of course
true.
not. That's I don't make anything up.
Oh, well, geez.
Nothing here is made up. Exaggerated, maybe, but not made up. I have to read you what the critics said, of course, about Mr. de Kooning's work. Harold Rosenberg, the art critic, he said the series was significant through its historical context about the post-World War II history and the American feminist movement. The feminists, of course, thought it was degrading and violent, and they didn't like it. But luckily, the critic Clement Greenberg rushed in to save the day by comparing them to the works of Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Picasso. They owe much to Picasso's later works.
There's a savagery to it that's very artistic.
Some say, of course, he was in a really bad divorce at the time, which is also not made up. Venus Verticordia by Dante Gabriel Rossetti. It was a British artist. The Vestal Virgins in ancient Rome were an institution to promote chastity and virtue. And in 114 BC, some of the Vestal Virgins were caught transgressing with Roman soldiers, and they were condemned to death, usually by stoning or some other violence. They declared
soldiers were?
No, not the soldiers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No way.
Not the soldiers, because they couldn't help themselves. No, I mean when you've got Vestal Virgins saying, I'm sorry.
She's super vestal.
Yeah. Here we have, of course, Mr. Klint's wonderful painting, one of two paintings of Judith and the head of Holofernes. Holofernes was, of course, an Assyrian general who had attacked and besieged her town of Bethulia, her hometown. And Judith, being a very beautiful and productive lady, could dress very well, decided that she would go and visit him in his tent to seduce him, which of course she was able to do. How can he help himself? And then she cut off his head. Cut off his head. So there she is, quite literally dressed to kill.
This is a weird question. Are there female artists also?
Are there female? Oh, of course.
I'm asking you, I don't know.
Yeah, of course there are female artists. Yes, so females are quite capable of creating, fruit painting. And so, yeah,
Flower paintings?
well, they generally like to do landscapes,
Like craft arts and
dabble. They have to be careful because they
Craft
can't,
arts.
it can't get in the way of housework and sort of
Right,
thing.
sure.
You know what I mean? So they really need to be able to paint, on their own time. As long as the house is maintained, and it's good. I think it's a good hobby. It keeps them occupied and out of trouble, right? Case in point, Thank you.